3D mapping test, August 9, 2023. We have the battery powering the unit, and we have the Ouster OS-0 Z2 and the laptop running RTABMap, and we have the GNS antenna at the top. This is the live playback of the sensor data. So on the right side is the RViz GUI showing the Ouster output. In the middle, we see RTABMap creating the 3D map in real time. And on the left-hand side are the stereo camera outputs. So that's the Z2 left and right cameras. So let's fast forward from here. So here we're about to see the loop closure occurring in RTABMap. So as you can see in the center panel, the z-axis shift is pretty significant from the start to the close to the end here. But RTABMap will figure out using the depth camera, and then there you go. The two end and start points have synced together to create a complete loop. The resulting scan of the AQ, the 4000 level outside, and this is including the sensor streams from the Ouster, Z2, and the GPS as inputs into RTABMap. So I wanted to highlight this example that I scanned on August 9th, 2023. And so we have these red points, which I believe are the LiDAR points, as well as some of these colored points as well, which are from the depth camera, the Z2 depth camera. So we can see our path that the sensor went through as the blue dots and lines here, the odometry. And we can see the path we took around EQ. So we can see a pretty decent scan resolution for how quick this was. This was just a 10-minute loop walking with the cart around EQ. I think if we took our time and looked under these columns and whatnot, we could get a better resolution. But I just wanted a quick test as we were trying to deal with the z-axis issues, where the odometry would drift upwards in the z-axis significantly throughout the scan. This is the first time we've run it with the depth camera in addition to the Z2 depth camera in addition to the Ouster. You can definitely make out the AQ here. So it's quite good, I think. And here we dipped underneath the AQ 5000 level. We can see that the Ouster captured some of the underside geometry as well. So this Ouster OS-0 has a really wide field of view. So all of the OS line LiDARs are 360 degrees, but their field of view in terms of the angle upwards and downwards that they scan are different. So OS-0 is the widest breadth one that they have. So the scan angle allows us to, even though we're relatively close to the building, to see underneath it. This is looking pretty decent. And so the greatest development with this time is that we finally got it to close the loop and address this z-axis shift. So as you can see, this white line up here is the previous odometry that the RTABMap was calculating until it got back to its original starting point. So here we can see our two blue lines of odometry. So on the bottom left we have our start line, and then right next to it is the line that we were walking on a second loop when we're back in this location. And so as we walked along here, RTABMap was able to recognize that we are traveling the same location and close the loop, and so fixing this z-axis shift that we were dealing with. So this white line above the point cloud is actually the trajectory that RTABMap calculated without the loop closure. And once it detected the loop closure, meaning that RTABMap understood that it was repeating scanning the same location, it connected those geometries together and overlaid them, and thus combining those two odometries at the same z-axis plane, and so correcting the z-axis shift. So this, I believe, was not possible until the depth camera was added to the system. Here we have the point cloud from RTABMap exported into .py files and imported into Cloud Compare to look at. So we have a few files here, so let's turn off everything except for the first one. So this one is the depth camera point cloud. So this is the point cloud generated just using the Z2 information from RTABMap. So it is fairly sparse and definitely not quite as precise as the Ouster. As you can see, let's see if we can increase the size of these points so we can be able to see them a little better. That's a little bit too big. Let's do 3. So the columns look pretty wonky. Like these should be straight lines, but they're all wavy. And the depth camera is also registering some of the sky as points. So that's obviously not correct. So the depth camera alone is not capable of producing high fidelity point clouds. It does an okay job. This might be enough for hazard avoidance with a given radius around potential objects. So if your methodology states that the vehicle should be 5 meters away from a hazard, then this might work well enough on its own. But for creating maps and for more precise identification of features, this is not going to cut it. So this is the depth camera. So we can turn this one off and then take a look at just the LiDAR point cloud. So this is from the Ouster OS-0 32. And we can see that the geometry looks much better, with straight lines precisely capturing the shape of those columns in straight lines. We can see the effect of the rings of the Ouster. So some areas have denser points than others because the ring, you can see the ring structure of the LiDAR scans. So we need to take that into account when we're trying to capture geometry. So with things like these columns, not a big deal because they're pretty regularly shaped, so we can interpolate the geometry between the points. But maybe if we tilt the Ouster, we can better capture these as we're moving in the XY plane through space. But yeah, the Ouster does a good job of capturing the geometry underneath the buildings. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so that's that. And then RTABMap can actually combine the depth camera and the Ouster point clouds together to create these colored point clouds. So this, I think, is really cool. So let's bump up the size of this point cloud. So with this, you see kind of the ring effect as well here. But we can see the colors of the points based off of the depth camera and the Ouster overlapping areas. So RTABMap can calculate can understand the field of view of the Z2, and then use that to project onto the LiDAR points. And so these can produce colored points like this. However, the field of view of the Ouster is 360 degrees. It can look at every single direction. The Z2 can only look at one direction on its own. So some of the points that are contained in the LiDAR cloud are not necessarily in this one if they were outside of the field of view of the Z2, but in the field of view of the Ouster. So that's something to keep in mind. But with understanding that limitation, we can plan our routes for capturing geometry in order to make sure we collect all the point data that we can for what we want to capture. So this is with just a 10-minute scan, so it's pretty decent. I realized I was looking at it upside down. There are those columns that we looked at earlier that look like wavy jello in the depth camera point cloud. But here we have combined the high fidelity point cloud from the Ouster with the color information from the depth camera. Doing a more detailed scan of AQ would be really cool. And then finally, RTABMap is also capable of generating meshes, but I think the point cloud that we had was not continuous enough, or I need to see what the different settings on the exporting of the mesh or generating of the mesh do, because this is not really a usable mesh at all. These points, as you can see, they're only connecting a handful of points together. Ooh. Can't really see what we're doing here. Yeah, so they're all just a few triangles connected to one another with lots of gaps in between. So this would not work for importing into any game engine or doing further processing like that. But this point cloud is really cool for only 10 minutes of scan time. And we can definitely do better with slower movement throughout the space. I think the limitation that you can come up with the OS-0 is because its range is not very good. Well, it's okay for its purpose, but it's only around 20-30 meters, and effectively it's probably less, around 10 meters for generating dense enough of a point cloud for it being added to this map. So it involves moving quite slowly through the space to generate the 3D map. So at walking speed around AQ, this is what we're capable of doing. So I wonder if at driving speed, what kind of quality we can achieve. Imagine that with the OS-0, we would have to crawl the vehicle very slowly, like a few kilometers an hour, in order to get good results. So next steps are to continue testing, and I want to try to create a more higher point density and detailed LiDAR scan, or LiDAR and depth camera scan of AQ, and see how well we can do with that. And then the next thing is also to see how well it does on a vehicle. So we'll attach that onto one of our test vehicles and drive it around campus.